I was saying that I will start by suggesting that we have all been and still empowered by Lisa Cahill's work and perspective. Students, especially myself, but also faculty. So I underline a few things that I put under the umbrella of the empowering and liberating perspective in Lisa's theological discourse. I looked at the framework, putting in dialogue the global context and practical challenges for women, which is one of the approaches of Lisa Cahill. The theological tool Lisa uses for this dialogue is solidarity. On the one hand, she affirms solidarity within a circle where human beings are willing to extend the basic good at a practical level. On the other hand, at a more theoretical level, Lisa claims that all should be judged by the same standards because the moral universals and the particulars can be reconciled. And it is a misleading debate to oppose them. Lisa affirms a globalizing solidarity much more clearly when she underscores the concept of absolute solidarity. That really struck me a lot. As an attentiveness, I quote her, so absolute solidarity is an attentiveness to the radical particularity and value of each person. So this is one of the main claims in her essay, Community versus Universals. And in her book, Blessed Are the Peacemakers, she put it more strongly that Christians are called to solidarity for renewal, a solidarity that becomes globalized, and she goes far to considering the grassroots work, such as the Amazonian network and women, on which I'm going to focus a little bit, and to considering communities as they experience the realities of environmental destruction, and even to becoming one of the advocates calling on the church to consider the practical challenges. Lisa Cahill contributed enormously, as Eddie Fernandez and Deborah Ross at Santa Clara said in their book, to call in the church to embrace the doing Christian theology as if people mattered. Lisa affirmed Christian social ethics prioritize structure of justice informed by compassion, solidarity, mutual respect, and the special regard for society's most vulnerable. So the theological and theoretical component of the concept of absolute solidarity reconciled with the practical challenges of the global context in Lisa's works, as well assessed in her book, Blessed Are the Peacemakers, in which she affirmed that global poverty and violence challenge all biblical scholars and theologians to draw every possible connection between the gospel of the reign of God, the cross as divine solidarity, with human suffering, the risen Christ, and the real political world. As early as letter of Paul, Lisa continues, the kingdom is understood to span races, cultures, and nations. The synoptic gospel, John letter, epistle, and Revelation envision the mission of the church across generations. The situation is no different for subsequent eras. God's rule requires expansive social political identification with the oppressed, mutual solidarity, non-condemnation, liberation from fear, and praxis that enhances human welfare. inasmuch as the disciple today has increased capacity to affect whole groups of socially and economically disadvantaged persons globally. The broader social duties of discipleship hardly can be ignored. End of quote. Lisa's interest to the Amazonian network, the women of the global South, and the many other of the global North is one of her main considerations of the broader social duties of discipleship, through which she conveys a clear message that the global context and the practical challenges are to be reconciled in social ethics. For as she put it again, I quote, as revealed by historical and sociological studies, the New Testament itself emerges from make sense of and forms or a community of discipleship and moral practice. The contribution of the Bible to ethics is at the level of community formation, not primarily at that of rules of principle. Christian solidarity and equality challenge exploitative socio-economic relationship whereby some are deprived of basic necessities of life, end of quote. So Lisa's effort to showing the contribution of the Bible to ethics at a community level to uplift a Christian solidarity that challenges exploitative patterns. Lisa resort to many practical cases, including that of the mining area in the ecclesial Amazonian network called REPAM that calls my attention. REPAM was set up in 2014 in answer to the grave concerns of Pope Francis and the Latin American Church regarding the deep wound that Amazonia and its people bear. REPAM embodies the promise Pope Francis made in the Amazon town of Maldonado, Peru, to affirm a wholehearted option for the defense of life, the defense of the earth, and the defense of culture. So constructing a dialogue with the above absolute solidarity theoretical claim of Lisa as inspired by divine solidarity in her work and using the ecclesial network of the Congo Basin, that is what I did. And that is the way I myself was really very empowered by Lisa, once again, for the protection of environment. So I'm suggesting that the latter REBAC, so the Basin Congo, is doing great work of advocacy at the national and international levels. But in light of Lisa's work, it is lacking in what Lisa calls the making sense of and form a community of discipleship and moral practice. This making sense needs to include the local struggle and practice of morality, which in the case of the Congo Basin should include the wisdom of the local communities, especially the forestry communities, where women are agent protector of the environment. As Lisa already put it in her essay entitled The Environment, the Common Good, and Women Participation, published in Theology and Ecology across the discipline, women globally are more affected than men by environmental degradation, since women typically are responsible for the daily sustenance of their families and communities. In many regions, women cultivate the land more than men. Women are the vanguard in resisting damage to their local environment. Local action connected to network of activists, theorists, and policymakers lend momentum to the global cause of eco-justice. So the framework of Catholic social teaching, as recast by Laudato Si, makes it especially clear that it is both necessary and possible to engage women agency, worldview, and theologies in effort toward environmental justice. Yet women's activism is not mentioned in Laudato Si, is not highlighted in Catholic social teaching, and has not emerged as a priority in faith-based organizing around environmental goals. That Lisa talking. So one of my response to Lisa's concern here is that in order for women to be mentioned in Laudato Si, and in light of the Rebak experience as the Ripam experience in the Amazonian, they needed first to be mentioned, or their work needed to be acknowledged by the ecclesial network structure that do inform Pope Francis. So when the synod on the environmental issues are taking place, how many women of the local community are included? So though Rebak has suggested what is called la territorialization of Laudato Si, so this is what Rebak in the Congo Basin is suggesting, that Laudato Si has to be territorialized, suggesting that African Synod include local communities' voices and include the voices of local churches in churches mining discourse. Rebak has not integrated women work yet, a work that existed before the creation of Rebak itself is not included. So to my personal question to Rebak of whether they have had already gathered the many aspects concerning the participation of women within community forestry groups, their response was, no, the question of women has never been sufficiently developed. So I believe there is a need for social ethicists as well as a church authority to make a shift in the vision of empowerment, shifting from thinking about empowerment, about empowering the local communities, to learning how to become empowered by the same communities. The top-down model of empowerment that characterizes the church does not do justice to the existing wisdom conveyed by women as they deal with environmental issues. So the church failure to appropriate and recover the Congo Basin gender and women activism, for example, is a twofold loss. Theologically and in terms of transformation of conflictual interests in the Congo Basin and in the Amazon. And those two, as we all know, constitute the lung upon which the preservation of the world common good lies. What is needed for both Ripam and Rebak is a prophetic vision rather than a top-down prescriptive approach of recommendations. So how should the prophetical mission of the church look like? The General Secretary of Ripam, whose name is Mauricio Lopez, suggests that it must be a metanoia, so a reversal of thought, the need for a change of mind and vision. I insist myself, a conversion from the relationship of power that characterize the Congo Basin and the Amazonian region, and the selfish exploitative patterns. That's the absolute solidarity that is drawn from divine solidarity and that consequently become globalized, as Lisa suggests, requires that our structural network, ecclesial or secular, local, national, and international, work on the need to change the conception and the mission of development by a progressive discernment of the situation experienced by the communities. And for this, they need to be empowered by the community themselves. So the issue in the Congo Basin concern land dispute among the local communities between the latter and the many institutions extracting natural resources, for example. According to a survey held by REBAC in one of the regions of the Congo, one of the DRC, the Congo dioceses, that is facing land conflict in the west part of the country, 2/3 of the household income is from farmer activities. So the same area is facing a high rate of deforestation, to which an irrational management of natural resources and mining is added. This is an area that is a church of the poor and marginalized, characterized by the madness of a post-colonial Africa, as Emmanuel Katangole affirmed it. So new phenomena related to exploitation, immigration, people from one side to move to another side because large space of the land are redistributed either to livestock breeding, extensive agroforestry, wood product, conservation. All these activities are managed by powerful international network. Then there is extension of land for wildlife conservation, also managed by international network. And Katongole called this strategy the mimetic reproduction of colonial rural terror in his book, Sacrifice of Africa. So considering all these aspects, my question to Lisa is how she sees the work of the church shifting, to become empowered by the local community and social ethics itself. A model of empowerment that is also inclusive of local communities is lacking. So the model empowerment is very embodied through the hierarchical bodies of the church, such as the Justice and Peace Commission advocacy, to the local and national government authority. The mobilizing role of the Justice and Peace Commission is still very weak and very Catholic church-oriented, lacking the moral imagination of the faith communities that include all traditions and reconcile differences and conflict. So there is advocacy, but the voices of the vulnerable themselves are mainly silenced. And when there is a voice, it is violence, because a silenced voice turns very quickly to violence in order to become a voice. So structure of participation are still much hierarchical. So there are measures to protect customary land through community forestry that equally depend on the advocacy of small groups funded by the Western world. However, many communities or members of the community are not aware of the law on customary land. So even when they are the one providing mechanism and wisdom to protect environment, though the empowerment style is still the top-down model, not considering that this wisdom of the local community, who are still most vulnerable and continually at risk of environmental disaster. So strategies of the Catholic Church are still reflecting the colonial approach. Responses are not yet those of empowering social imagination or learning from existing empowering imagination. So this in part explains the reason why the social imagination of women is still not valued, including in Laudato Si. So attention is too focused on the traditional hierarchical model rather than the charismatic expression of women. So to conclude, Catholic social ethics will gain in imagining the future building up, the African cosmology and the Amazonian cosmology and spirituality of nature. If there is any post-colonial model needed, then it must be located at the intersection between the globalized world interest and the empowering African and Amazonian cosmology and spirituality of nature. So when too much power from the Western founding model takes all the place, unbalance is created, the local forces are weakened, and conflict arise. So absolute solidarity, as Lisa suggested, indeed is not utopic. It must help to reconcile the local models and the global interests in protection of our common home. So thank you very much, Lisa.